So, welcome everyone today. I'm really excited to do our 2025 wrap up on the view from the cash register. And Cindy and Casey were so great in the first two, and I know there were so many takeaways on what's really transpiring in retail today with technology at the cash register and how that's really impacting the customers and how they buy. So my name is Linda Johansson James. I am the CEO and founder of International Retail Group, also the publisher of International Retail Magazine. And I'm really excited to be representing retail technology and Dominic and Vanessa, and just really excited about this conversation today. So before we get started and really just jump right in, Casey and Cindy, why don't you just take a minute and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Hi, I'm Casey Rosette. Good to see everyone today. I'm a marketing leader with nearly 20 years working with iconic brands like Vans, The North Face, Wrangler, and others. And most recently, I've been consulting in the spaces of brand strategy, investment strategy, and analytics, and excited to dig into holiday retail today.
Great. Thank you. Cindy?
Hi, I'm Cindy. I oversee store design and visual merchandising. I've had a long career with Nordstrom and have recently been working for Purple Mattress, doing that function for them. As well, I'm just delighted to be here with these two fabulous women who are very well informed about what's going on in the retail space.
Well, thank you very much. And listen, a big thank you to Vanessa, who kind of coordinates all of keeping us all together. And listen, one of the things that we want to talk about, like right out of the gate, and you guys are always boots on the ground, right out in the field, is what did 2025 really teach us? We talked about, the convenience is expected now. The consumer really doesn't have any patience. And last holiday season was a record breaker, right? Over $1 trillion in sales. So as we think about the technology and making that cash wrap experience, like, since it's so much quicker, making the consumer feel really great about what's transpiring in that experience. And Casey, you were telling us before we jumped on retailers that you visited during the holiday season and ones that you thought did really well implementing some of this quick technology, and maybe some that didn't perform so well. So why don't you start us off?
Sure. Yeah, so I got out in the real world of retail during the holidays, but I also did a lot of shopping online naturally. And so, from a IRL experience, I think there were a few retailers that stood out to me. One, I would say, from a brick and mortar standpoint, Under Armour, I had a great experience there where, the product was easy to find, but what really stood out to me more than that was the service and, congested stores, very busy, high traffic. So positive signal for them. But really, I would say calm and empowered and engaging retail staff. I had an example, for instance, where I forgot something. I needed to grab one more item. I had to step out of line. And it was absolutely no big deal. The person who was checking me out didn't make me feel rushed, held the line, gave me a smile, thanked me for my business. It just felt way more human, different than a lot of other experiences I've had. I know we've all shared experiences, even of late, where we've walked in and not even been acknowledged. And so I think there is a huge part of it that comes back to, yes, technology, but also team empowerment and engagement. And it's pretty palpable when you have a team who cares versus a team who doesn't. So that was one example. I think, big retailers like Walmart are winning, and, we'll talk later maybe about some of the innovations that they're deploying, but I think they're behaving differently. They're attracting a much broader audience than they did before. And some of their data of late of even going upstream and up income is pretty interesting. They're getting away from some of the stigma or typical expectations I think they've had in the past. And then in the digital world, a few that excited me, I have young children and they're into baseball. And so Savannah Bananas, which if you don't know them, look them up. But from a retail consumer and brand experience, I think they're doing an amazing job. And I ordered a couple of products from their website along with tickets. And even the way they showed up, bright yellow bag, little, thank you card on the inside, yellow tissue paper, like it was very through and through, all the communication, a very specific brand tone, every touch point I felt like was really well done, but very authentic to who they are.
Well, that's incredible. And I think, everything that you just said weaves right into that customer experience. So what technology you're implementing really needs to have the consumer at the forefront. And Cindy, I had such an incredible visit at your store at Baybrook Mall. They were phenomenal, but two things really caught my attention. Number one is I didn't see a POS desk anywhere. I mean, there was like no desk, which is totally new, right? And the second thing is the way the store was merchandised. They literally told me to lay down on the mattress right when I came in. What am I looking for? So talk to us about, you have so much experience in merchandising and what you've done in your life. How has that changed now with the way the consumer buys in, and what have you done differently in looking at the store?
Well, first of all, Casey, you brought up a fabulous interaction you had at Under Armour. Fabulous. And I love that. That's a heads up game. And I think that as we get into more and more technology, and you can see it fraying at the edges of what the interactions look like in store, whether at the cash wrap or just in basic engagement, right? We've become lazier. Folks aren't as engaged because they don't know that they need to be. And they aren't really understanding that we have to celebrate the person that's actually walking into the brick and mortar location. And the only way to do that is through really, truly being heads up, modeled behavior. That's not done just because you say, I want you to greet people. That's done because you choose a very practiced way to teach folks how to script that. They still need to sound authentic, but they have to actually practice and know that there's an expectation of the way they would interact with the consumer. No different from my Nordstrom experience back in the day. I think that when we think about merchandising, we think about how to direct the consumer and bring them along on the journey you want them on that still celebrates what they're looking for is tricky, right? And so at Purple Mattress, it's a more refined category, and it's very particular. And so you can really, I think, control that a little easier than perhaps a larger box where it isn't as, there are less employees to consumer ratio. And we just talked about the fact that there were less hiring on for holiday staffing this year. And so I think that's an interesting factoid, right? And when we think about that navigation, the personal, hey, how, are you looking for that thing? Or I saw you looking at that item. Did you see this that goes back with it? There's very little of that happening these days because there just isn't the time for it. And I think from the selling staff perspective, and I think that's a miss. I think that where we can actually understand that engagement matters, and it still will matter, is everything. And but it does fall apart really at the register. And I think that we can probably get further into that as we go.
Well, and two, the way the consumer is buying now and spending their money has changed, right? So the consumer behavior has changed. And what we learned at NRF, which by the way was probably one of the most incredible shows from a technology standpoint, but here's what we heard is that probably 70% of businesses still have not implemented any AI, right? Because they're not really sure where to begin and where to start. But where they can really begin is understanding how the consumer is buying now. So many places don't accept cash anymore. And cash is only 11% now of what consumers spend. 73% is what? Apple Wallet, credit cards, yada, yada. So Casey, how do retailers have to change that POS experience to understand now they're not counting change? And even if they are counting change, they don't know how to. I mean, most of them don't know how to anymore.
They don't know how to change.
Talk to us about the experience at the cash wrap and how that needs to change with retailers and how it did change in 2025.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of approaches that, are already evolving for a lot of forward-thinking brands. One, to Cindy's example and with Purple, is, what is a cash wrap anymore? And do you need one central location or hub for consumers, and what's the purpose of it?
Yeah.
If you don't have a physical till, then is it gift wrapping? Is it personalization? Like, how do you think about other benefits that you can introduce? Or if you need to have a queue and you have a high demand brand and there's a benefit of, there's many consumers to one or two staff and you have to organize in some way, then like what else are you engaging them with? And so are there video screens? Are there interactive kiosks? What can you do? Like we talk about it, in Vans and other footwear brands, is like an endless aisle. And so if you're in store, maybe it's an iPad, but better yet, maybe it's some other kind of large interactive screen where you can browse and actually increase your basket while you're in the queue, and think beyond, there's certainly a brand, but also a commercial benefit.
Yes. And the consumer now doesn't want to wait. So when you see lines, like we used to wait in lines during the holiday, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we'd wait because we were so excited to get something, right? But now the consumer, if they have to wait more than a couple of minutes, they're like ordering it on their cell phone. So there's technology now. I mean, Shopify is just a simple one, right? Where you don't have a POS anymore. You give your people mobile phones and they check people out when they're ready to go, right? Mm-hmm. And what about cashless? What about some of these technologies, like even in grocery stores where they have the carts now, the smart carts, right? Where they check you right out there. So what did you see when you were out? What did you see? What retailer did you see doing a really great job at managing the new consumer lack of patience? Did you guys see anyone that really stood out to you during the holiday seasons that really got it with how the consumer's buying today?
I don't know. I feel like we still have some room to grow here. And I think that I think queuing is critically important. I think, Casey, you brought that up. And what are we doing when we are? Because you do still have to have a central location. You don't in a small environment like the one I built. POS is non-existent, and that's purposeful. We don't want somebody standing at a desk when they're waiting for a customer to come in. Very different from a high transaction environment where you do still have to have at least one central spot. I love the idea, and I love it when I can run into somebody who's on the sales floor who does have a phone and they're able to check me out right there. There's nothing that delights me more. And I love it even more if they say, will you go sit down? I got this. That is like happy day. And so I think that we have such a huge opportunity to figure this out. But where I really felt unhappy was in some of these locations, and I won't name names here, but one in particular where they figured out speed of queuing and that you can self-checkout and whatnot. But in order to even get to the little self-checkout, you were in between stanchions and the line went on for days. And I'm standing there with my item and I'm thinking, how bad do I need this thing? And that's when I walked out. And so I think that there wasn't enough engagement for me. Had I been queuing and there had been something for me to engage with, whether tactile product, I love screens. I love the idea of adding to your basket. And that is something, Casey, that needs to be thought through, because really you should have people bring things while you're in line. That is
so you know what you're making me think of? I mean, this is a little niche, but it's ironic given the type of product they sell. And I'm not going to name names because I think it's a category challenge. But craft stores, which you know how much like growth has exploded in IRL shopping and people picking up hobbies. And I've been to two of the leading ones, and I will say they both do it really poorly, which is the queue may have so much product and stuff in your face, but they're long. They don't have enough staff that is educated and informed and engaging consumers. And ironically, you have a consumer base that is like probably pretty tactile and probably quite engaged. And it feels like a huge missed opportunity. And, you know, I just think there's ripe opportunity there. So if anyone's listening and they're in that space, to really think differently about the checkout in that case. And my guess would be, I don't have the data, but my guess would be that in that environment, you're probably closer to 50-50 cash and card because of the demographic and age range. So maybe you do have to think, in between traditional and modern, but I dread going in those stores. And so holiday is like obviously a peak period, but that's kind of one that was sour for me.
Well,
I think
and that's
when you think about that, sorry, Linda, just one thing. I think when you think about that, I just wonder, when we're considering what we're putting in a queuing situation, are we curating that? Or is it just a hodgepodge of stuff? And I think that if there were stories for me, I would be so all about it, because I am that girl, right? I love to, see something pique my interest and then start really going. And chances are I'd be picking up, right? So I think that we have an opportunity as retailers to really think back and really think through the presentation and the merchandising choices, right? What are we putting in front of the customer? Or is it really just a bunch of stuff? And how do we tell a story around it? Sorry, Linda, I interrupted you.
No. I thought it was perfect, because it leads into what Casey had mentioned earlier. And how many of you went out during the holiday season and they didn't have the product that you wanted in the store, and they said, well, but you can go ahead and order it right now. You can go ahead and order it right now online, or I'll order it for you and I'll ship it to your house. And my feedback always was, well, if I wanted to order it online, I wouldn't be in the store. And there's so many technologies out there now, so much AI that's easy to implement, that tells you what your consumer is buying, how much they're buying, and how not to run out of inventory. Because if we're still doing that piece of it manually, then you probably didn't win the holiday, because you upset someone like me who goes in store for a reason, right? So Casey, you have, and I just have one example, and this retailer is doing it all the time. They're minimalizing their inventory because they want people to buy online. But there is a segment, 80% of us, that still want to shop in store. So they're making me shop somewhere else because they're not attending to my needs, and it'd be very simple to find out my needs. So Casey, you have some examples of that too. And I think that was one of the losses for the holiday season, was a lack of inventory in a lot of retail stores. Do you feel the same way?
Well, yeah, I agree. And I'll take it like to one other angle too, which is that I think you have to be really careful, especially in, the volatile state of retail right now, and really what a lot of retailers have felt for the past few years, and not let it be just a push approach to inventory and what's on the floor, and let it actually be a pull and a demand centered approach. And what I mean by that is, you're seeing gluts of inventory, whether it's full price or outlet, that are really shaping the story because the brand needs to move through it, and not necessarily catering to the breadth or the offering that the consumer wants. And so to your point, Linda, like, I have to imagine a SKU analysis and profit analysis is driving a lot of those choices. And you're missing out not only on the immediate purchase, but really the engagement and relationship with the brand. And, I'll give one example, and I'll name the brand without going too deep, but I don't typically go into a lot of outlet malls for my personal shopping. I've done so much comp shopping in my life that I'm like a little burnt out, to be honest. But I went into the Myrtle Beach outlets, which are not too far from the holidays, and they're really nice and big. And there's a ton of, really premium stores and brands that are there. And in fact, that's where the Under Armour engagement was. That was really great. Now, conversely, and this doesn't have anything to do with the staff, by the way, but the most shocking experience that I had during holiday was walking into the American Eagle outlet and seeing racks and racks and racks of 99-cent and $1.99 full apparel, not just underwear, but full apparel. And I happened to be with my sister-in-laws at the time, and I was geeking out, and they were all looking at me like, well, yeah, it seems weird, but like, what's the big deal? And I'm like, the signal that sends to the market and to the consumer
Yes.
is alarming.
Yes.
Obviously the brand is performing well, the stock is performing well, but I think I bring it up because I think it's a really important lesson and learning of what you put out from an inventory standpoint, and maybe being choiceful is the better path if the alternative is everything no one wants and putting that in a nice environment. But it was a hodgepodge, and it was a lot of very random product that it honestly, it felt like outlets 20 years ago when that truly was the way that they were used to clear through inventory. Now I think the expectation from consumers is a much more curated representation of the brand. And so
it diminishes the brand, and it makes it expensive.
Yeah.
I agree. I'm sure you agree, Cindy, too, because what happens is then you've got, first of all, you've bought too much inventory, which is why you're selling it for 99 cents. And what's your real margin there? And today, retailers don't have to do that. They don't have to guess.
Yeah.
They don't have to have a warehouse full of inventory, right?
There's so many other options to clear it, right? And so like that, I had 3 people looking back at me like I was crazy, but I'm like, they're upside down on this. Like there's no way that logically makes financial sense. And all you've done from a marketing standpoint is now trained your consumer, right? So what actually was a good deal at maybe $15, $20 feels less so because you've flooded the market with, really like unsustainably priced product.
Well, and what is their
I think it sends a message that it's not valuable.
Of course.
And so
just
as a consumer, I'm just saying that from a consumer's view, that I wouldn't necessarily want to purchase in that environment because it feels less valuable.
It turned me off. It felt like walking into one of those like bin stores where it's all the returns and like, and I have to wonder about what data they use to make the purchase that bought them so deeply into something that they had to market that place. And so there is something in this whole thing that one would assume that they're digging into, because no one wants to be in that position, that there is no margin in that. There's zero. It's a loss margin. So
they have the data. And I just heard from a client like 4 or 5 days ago, so interesting, in case you brought this up, who bought all this product. Nobody bought it. And now they're doing 75% discount. And I'm like, but what signal is that sending? So I think the lesson in 2025 is that discounting is not the way to go. If you don't know what to order and how much to order and what your customers are buying, there are systems like Shopify, like other systems that you can use that tells you exactly what to order, right? So we don't need to discount anymore. And then don't drive your consumer to 2026 that the first thing they see when they walk in your store is what? Christmas items that you couldn't sell at a discount, right?
I mean, there's like, there are pilots and, there's ways to fully invest in what I'm about to describe, but there's ways to do it with a lighter touch to kind of test and learn. So you avoid those traps, especially with new product introduction and innovation. 2, I'm thinking about, like, personally, I use Nuuly, which is a clothing rental subscription. And it's one that was founded by Urban Outfitters in Anthropologie. And that has changed the way I think about shopping fundamentally. And I think they do a really good job. It's all virtual. I think, they probably either they do or they will, I'm sure, have like some boutique experiences. But that I think is really interesting because you're getting so much data and you understand, how often people are wearing it for what occasion, return rates, keep rates, because you can purchase products out of the box. But the other one, I don't know if you've heard of TYB, but it's a community-based program, and brands can opt in, and then they have challenges they give to their consumers, and they can ask questions, and then consumers earn points that they can redeem toward a product discount or certain curated product that they're creating. And like that to me is a low lift way of finding out, maybe you want to launch a product and you're trying to decide on 3 of 5 colorways, like look for community, look for ways, and the data, yes, but also for something not fully tested, like where do you go to get a gut check before you sink a lot of capital, because it seems like there are some fairly big brands that are somehow off the mark.
I agree. And listen, I could just talk to you ladies forever. Seriously, we at the beginning of our call thought, oh, we have plenty of time, and now we have 3 minutes. So listen, there's so much great takeaway here. For me, it still really goes back to listening to you ladies who have so much experience, and me being out in the field all the time. It really still is about giving the customer what they want, when they want, how they want. So whether you're in store, online, TikTok, Instagram, whatever, wherever you sell your product, make sure the story is the same, right? And so I guess from a final perspective from each of you, like just a kind of a round robin real quick, what is your predictions on what's going to be? And I really wanted to get into loyalty, but gosh, we didn't even have time. Maybe that's a whole nother one just on loyalty. But so tell me, Cindy, really quickly, in your mind, what does the retailer need to do in 2026 to continue to be successful in this marketplace?
Well, first of all, vet your tools before you engage with the consumer. Make sure that they aren't going to slow down the process, because we tend to go too fast, roll out to all, and we actually haven't vetted them and made sure that they actually work back well with the consumer and or with the company. So get rid of the fails. And then we've got to figure out returns. You cannot buy something online and not be able to take it into a store and return it. And when that is something that happens, that is 100% friction. And I think that that has to be solved for. And to hear, oh, you bought that online, I can't take that back here, is, well, I won't be back to them, period. So do you see what I'm saying? That is a loss in engagement. And I think at the end of the day, continue to progress. Take a hold of all these tools that are out there and use them, heat mapping, AI tools, the basic stuff, and really use them to help decide how you're going to continue to pull the customer in, and whether it is online and or in your brick and mortar locations.
Wonderful.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Stacey?
Yeah, I mean, I would just add to that. I totally agree. But would just add that I think, you need to get really clear on the purpose of your brick and mortar footprint and what that is uniquely offering to your consumer. I think with, digital, obviously in terms of brand owned e-commerce and multi-brand digital marketplaces, but now even with agentic shopping and how, products or brands are showing up, you need to meet people where they are and be available. But when it comes down to a choice to walk in your store, what's the why? Like, is it a service proposition? Is it particular product in terms of a unique launch that's happening in a key city? I've seen a few of those recently that have really driven a lot of traffic. But I think that's the piece that is going to continue to be really important, because it's now so easy and so frictionless in a lot of ways to just place the order online, that I think, the remit and the purpose of brick and mortar is going to have to continue to kind of expand, and that tether of experiential between both is that much more important.
Well, listen, you ladies really summarized it so perfectly. The only thing I can add to that is, if you're a retailer or a brand, listen to me, the cash register is no longer the end of your customer's journey. It's not the end. It's really just part of their journey. So how are you looking at your consumers? And Cindy and Casey said it the best way, is that you have to always be looking for new, innovative ways, but the customer has to be at the heart of it. And what do your customers want? So thanks everyone for joining. A really special shout out to Casey and Cindy. I wasn't as organized this time, so you guys just jumped right in and handled it perfectly. And thank you to Dominic and Vanessa and Retail Tech Media Nexus for really offering us a way to keep learning in the industry that we all love, retail. So thanks everyone for attending. Appreciate it. Thanks again, Cindy and Casey, and a big shout out to Vanessa for all her hard work.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.